So today we're going to be talking about the future of the Imperial Guard and discussing how they might fare in 9th edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we like to get the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. The big puzzle that is 40k 9th edition is slowly being completed, so today I thought we were going to talk about how all of these rules changes might impact the Hammer of the Emperor going forwards. Games Workshop have made a preview article for the Guard a couple of days ago, but to be honest, in terms of actual changes it was a little bit light. They told us about their new morale system, which certainly is a helpful development for the Guard, clarified the fact that wyverns were blast weapons, but besides that mainly talked about rules that we already know about. So in this video we're just going to talk about all the changes that have been previewed so far in 9th edition, whether they're good or bad for the Guard, and how we might be fielding our armies slightly differently in future. So I'll be honest, a lot of the army structure changes for the Imperial Guard have not been positive ones in my opinion. The fact that a single battalion or brigade is going to be needed to get them a maximal amount of command points pre-game kind of takes away one of Guard's advantages, was that they could rustle up a lot of command points very easily. Most competitive Guard lists tended to be running something like 3 battalions, and this wasn't really something that a lot of factions could afford to do. I think between the 12 command points we get at 2,000 points, plus the extra ones that we get throughout the game, we're not necessarily going to come out behind on command points unless you are running something excessive like a double brigade, but I think it's more the case that the other armies will catch up a bit. I think that the changes could actually be a bit of a negative for things like mass infantry, as even if you filled out a brigade detachment, then 12 infantry squads only go so far. If you're going any sort of true horde style Imperial Guard, you'll likely want more than that, which means that you will likely be paying command points for it in the future. One pet hope I have for a new Guard Codex is they might bring back some form of platoons, maybe being able to field 1 to 3 infantry squads for each troop's choice, which might help get around this. In general, I don't think that the reduced minimum table sizes for those that are using them will help us much either. We have very long-range weapons such as basilisks and Leman Russ battle tanks, and the relevance of those extreme-ranged guns is going to be reduced if you're playing on a smaller board. Still helpful, don't get me wrong, but there won't be as much of a significant advantage over 48-inch weapons as they were before. The Overwatch change, I'd say again, isn't a particularly positive one for the Guard. It was quite helpful just to deal some incidental chip damage with all of our infantry squads overwatching when enemy units made it into combat with them, but I think that's rarely going to be worth a command point unless you're, say, stacking Overwatch with defensive gunners on some very big scary unit like a Leman Russ battle tank, or maybe a super heavy or something. Finally, on the doom and gloom side, the fact that cultists have jumped up to 6 points a model makes me incredibly nervous for our rank and file troops. I would describe guardsmen as decent but not overpowered at 4 points, certainly some of the stronger infantry in the game, but over the course of 8th edition everything else has caught up a bit, and in particular mass anti-infantry weapons have become a lot more prevalent and cheap. As with the cultists, guardsmen going to 6 points would be a 50% increase in their points cost, and it's far more than the Necron Warrior or Space Marine Intercessor that we've already seen previewed. I think guardsmen going to 6 points really would encourage people to go far heavier on the mech, maybe just keep a few infantry platoons around just as a screening mechanism. Foot Guard would pretty much be dead in the water competitive wise if they changed it to 6 points, I think. In all honesty, I suspect they probably will go up to 6 points, as I think they'd be making some very strange decisions indeed if they do to point them cheaper than Chaos Cultists. I know Cultists have various Chaos synergies, but they don't even get a Legion trait. Their base stat line is just worse, and the Guard have some very good synergies with their infantry squads in orders. I'll still hope for 5 though. I think 5 points will be a reasonable change and will be far more in line with the Necrons and Space Marine changes. I'll very much have my fingers crossed for the infantry. However, on more positive notes, we've got quite a lot of changes that I think will benefit the Guard. Desperate Breakout is certainly helpful as a stratagem. It's expensive, but if you have some sort of scary Death Star unit wrap one of your characters or outline members of an infantry squad, the difference between it being able to shoot with your entire gun line or not could very easily be worth 2 command points. For the shooting phase in general, I think Guard have got a lot of benefits from this. Firstly, blast weapons are going to be pretty excellent against hordes. In particular, wyverns are going to be absolutely murderous with 24 shots against anything with 11 or more models in it. I'm hoping that plasma cannons get the blast rule, as this would make them very efficient killers of anything with 6 or more models in it, and units like Leman Russ battle tanks will certainly win big against various big units. Again though, this could be a bit of a negative for infantry squads. Getting minimum 3 shots with blast weapons against them is going to be relevant against quite a lot of smaller blasts. Being able to shoot in close combat, albeit with a -1 to hit penalty, is going to be pretty big on vehicles. Naturally this is anything besides blasts, so our blast related units are still going to have to be screened with infantry. In particular though, I think that this could lead to a few more heavy flamers being taken on outlying vehicles, as it's a pretty solid all-round weapon that will just be able to deal good damage even if you are in combat. I think it means that in more mechanised lists we'll be taking things like artillery and battle tanks with blast weapons towards the back of the army, and you'd be wanting to run units that can fire into close combat efficiently up in front of them. Things like Hellhounds, Sentinels with heavy flamers, or even Lehman Russ Punishers who will absolutely love blazing away with their Punisher Gatling cannons into close combat. In combination, to help out vehicles even further, the no moving and shooting penalty is an absolute godsend for a ballistic skill 4 army like Guard. Basically everyone's getting the Talon trait from this, at least vehicle wise, on every single tank. It's going to be excellent for Sentinels. You're now actually going to be able to move and shoot them without completely destroying your firepower. Our air support in Valkyries, Vendettas and Vultures are just going to be far more accurate on the move. Chimeras and Tauroxes are going to be able to move and shoot with their heavy weapons. Ross Sponsons will be far more viable. And you can be doing some fairly silly things with artillery, as they actually have really quite fast move characteristics, so unless anything changes, you can very strangely have your Basilisks and Wyverns moving 12 inches per turn, still laying down maximal firepower. Certainly doesn't make sense, but that is how the Talon players have had it for a while now. Overall, it means that we're just going to be able to position our units far better. There was another slight intriguing little tidbit from the Warhammer community article, saying that we might be able to advance and shoot with heavy flamers now. I don't know if this is hinting at rules that we haven't seen yet, or if they just weren't being very clear about what they were talking about, but again that would make things like heavy flamers far more viable than they are at present. In 9th there is going to be more line of sight blocking terrain on the board, thanks to these obscuring ruins that we've been hearing about. In general that's not going to be amazing for a gunline faction, but as Imperial Guard we have a lot of artillery available. The vast majority of factions don't have anywhere near as much ignores line of sight weaponry as us, or at least not as many options to choose from, so having a small contingent of artillery I think will be even more viable than before. Finally, for the shooting phase, and quite an important one, is that we're now no longer going to be subject to stacking -1 to hit modifiers, which are extremely punishing as the Imperial Guard. Only having ballistic skill 4 to start with means that hitting on 6s just really isn't viable for us. -1 to hit modifiers will still hurt a lot, but you can no longer get to the situation where you literally can't shoot at the enemy at all with ballistic skill 4 weapons. Eldar flyers are going to be significantly easier to deal with. In the combat phase, I think that the fact that enemy units are going to have to reach every single unit as part of their multi-charge is really quite a big benefit. In the Imperial Guard we tend to run multiple small units, whether they're just lots of infantry squads side by side, or having a fair few tanks and a gun line. Enemies just aren't going to be able to charge all of your army at once now, and have a big melee Death Star take massive bites out of your army, at least not if they're charging from a reasonable distance away or out of deep strike reserve. No Overwatch is certainly a downside, but this will mean that we suffer a few less melee casualties, particularly from the biggest, heaviest hitting combat units. Finally, from the core rules changes, I think that the morale changes are really quite a big boon to the Guard. No more is the enemy just going to be able to kill 7 or 8 men out of a Guard squad, and then just know that the rest are going to run away automatically. If they want the unit dead, then they're going to have to kill 9 men at a time, and just have the last one run away. It's not looking amazing for infantry at the moment, but that will be a pretty decent survivability buff to the Guard infantry line. I wasn't usually the biggest fan of taking things like commissars before, I didn't really think they added all that much, but after these morale changes they are looking less relevant than they were before. I'd be tempted to just take more bodies now, and leave some of the morale support choices at home. In terms of units to watch, I think that artillery could be some of the biggest winners from this edition, even if their ranges aren't so great. Pretty much all of the changes to shooting really do help them quite a lot, and of course we know that the Vigilus formations aren't going away either. Theoretically you could have a Wyvern have 48 shots against an Orc Horde by getting it to fire twice, then also stack that with something like reroll 1s from Cadian or a Master of Ordnance, ignores cover from the Relic from the Artillery Company, and maybe +1 to hit with overlapping fields of fire, and you've got yourself a lot of dead hordes on your hand out of one tank. With benefits to blasts on infantry squads, I think it might tip the balance a little bit to Cadian over Kaschan for blast weapons. As with Kaschan, they also buff the number of shots, so you'll sort of be giving yourself a redundant buff against any units that are 6 models or more. Though of course the Kaschan buff will still be very relevant against anything that's not more than 6 models. I think that Russes and other vehicles are really going to come into their own as well. Again, a lot of the changes help them, and also seem to hurt infantry a bit, so I think that we are going to be seeing a more heavily mechanised force of Guard on the tabletop from now. Obviously all of this is points changes depending. If they do hit Russes hard with the points increases, then I guess we'll have to re-evaluate. In general though, it is looking a lot more viable to field a very heavy vehicle force, thanks to being able to shoot in combat, and all of the various mobility and shooting buffs that they got. One funny little combo that I thought I'd mention would be using a Death Strike missile and strategic reserves, where if you really wanted to, you could pay a command point to keep the Death Strike off the board, and then at least the rules as we've seen them don't seem to give you any penalty to bring it on very late in the game. I still don't think it's necessarily going to make the Death Strike good, but if you wanted to use one, it could be very funny just to have it turn up out of reserve and fire at absolutely no penalty, with a very high chance of making that roll to see if it launches. I honestly think that some of the biggest sources of hope in the future are the Forge World Unit review that they're thinking about doing, and whatever Imperial Guard Codex that we get in 9th. Games Workshop have said that they're going to be looking at all of the Forge World rules, hopefully rebalancing them to an extent, and if they go any way to make sure that the Forge World options are kind of in line with the options they have from their own codexes, then the Guard really stand to win out big time. Compared with other races, the Imperial Guard and Space Marines just have so many more Forge World options compared with the various other factions. If even a few of these Forge World choices got very good, then it could really increase the power of the army overall. Say for example, if static Basilisk emplacements got very strong for artillery, or if the Trojan support vehicle actually became worth taking for regular Russes and things. If some of these units either get better rules or get cheaper points costs, then it could be very good for us. In terms of the codex in the future, it'd be good to see them take a second look for the Guard and maybe readjust things a little bit to try and align them with the current power of the game now. I think Guard were one of those armies that started out incredibly strong early in 8th, but it's more of a case that everyone's taken up and often overtaken them, so a fresh look at the Guard could certainly give us a decent boost. I'd hope that the codex might be sooner in the release cycle, just due to how early the Guard codex came out when 8th dropped, but obviously there's no guarantees that that's going to be the case. In particular, certain Guard regimental traits, particularly the Mordian and Talon one, would need drastically reworking with the changes that have come in 9th. I think it's a safe bet that they won't be staying the same, as the Talon vehicle strategy and the Mordian Overwatch are both now significantly more redundant due to the new mechanics. At least those two regiments should be getting some new options which could give us interesting and different strategies, and I'll hold out just a little bit of hope that they might actually even address these in the FAQs and erratas when 9th drops. So overall, of course, it's too early to say whether or not Guard are going to be stronger in the new edition or not, but I think that it's looking like the Astra Militarum are going to be a bit more of a tank-heavy armoured force compared with how they were in 8th at the strongest level. If there's any other units that you're particularly excited to use, or anything that I've missed that could be relevant to the Guard in these changes, then please let us know down in the comments. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed to Auspex Tactics already, then feel free to. We'll most certainly be covering more things for the Hammer of the Emperor and plenty of other Imperial factions as we go into 9th. If you've been enjoying the videos, I'd just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page where we're doing an Imperial Guard giveaway at the very start of July. Basically, for each $1 pledged towards the channel, you get one ticket in the draw. I'll do the draw with a random number generator, and 3 winners will receive a copy of the Start Collecting Astra Militarum box, a command squad, and 2 boxes of the Easy Build Cadians. So it could be a decent chunk of an allied planetary defence force, or a reasonable amount of reinforcements for a Guard army. If you'd be interested in taking part, or just supporting the channel as a whole, then the Patreon link is down in the video description below. In next month's draw, we'll be giving away some copies of that Indomitus box. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.